Winter does not end all at once. It loosens. The cold releases its hold slowly, almost reluctantly. The world remains quiet, even as change approaches. Snow still lies heavy in the fields. The earth remains sealed. And yet, something beneath the ground has already begun to stir. Tonight, as sleep begins to take hold, we journey into the foggy space between folklore and fear. If you're listening from the edge of the night, whether beneath moonlight or in the quiet shelter of your room, you're invited to leave a small trace of yourself here. A comment, a place, a moment. These stories deepen when we know where they're being carried. And if you find yourself returning to these slow hours, night after night, you're welcome to stay with us. Fairytales After Dark is made for those who prefer meaning that unfolds gently. This is the tale of the Groundhog, not as a novelty, not as a prediction, but as a witness. A creature who wakes when the year hesitates, and in doing so, allows the rest of the world to notice that winter has begun to shift. Settle in, breathe deep, and let your thoughts drift into the unknown. Welcome to Fairytales After Dark. Long before towns gathered for ceremony, long before calendars fixed dates to the wall, people watched animals to understand time, not clocks, not numbers, living things. In the old European countryside, February was never treated as an ending. It was treated as a hinge, the month when winter could still tighten its grip or begin to loosen. No one expected certainty. What they sought was recognition. Animals that slept beneath the ground were watched most closely. The bear, the badger, the hedgehog, creatures that vanished into the earth for months, their sleep deep, their bodies withdrawn from the living world. When one of these animals emerged, even briefly, it was taken as a sign that something below the surface had already changed. The groundhog belongs to this lineage. He is not important because he predicts. He is important because he witnesses. He crosses a threshold humans cannot, moving between deep sleep and waking life, between hidden time and visible season. Hibernation was never seen as ordinary rest. It was understood as a form of death-like sleep. The body slowed, breath thinned, movement ceased. The animal became part of the earth itself, alive, but unreachable. When the groundhog wakes, he does not rush, he does not linger either. He rises once, blinks at the world, and returns or remains. That single moment is enough. In the oldest understanding, winter does not end because the groundhog emerges. Winter ends because something beneath the earth has already shifted. The groundhog simply makes it visible. This is why the ritual repeats. Humans do not ask the groundhog because he is accurate. They ask because uncertainty is easier to face when it is named. The act of watching, of gathering, of marking a moment together. This is the real function of the myth. In early communities, the emergence of a hibernating animal was a permission structure. It allowed people to acknowledge hope without demanding it, to say, something has begun, without insisting it must finish quickly. The shadow belongs to this same symbolic language. A shadow is not a threat, it is recognition, the world seeing itself clearly. If winter still casts a long shadow, then it remains. If it does not, then the light has changed. Either way, the groundhog does not decide, he reflects. The animal stands still. The world interprets. There is a quiet humility in this arrangement. The groundhog does not promise warmth. He does not guarantee growth. He only marks the moment when waiting can be noticed, when patience becomes conscious rather than endless. Imagine an early morning, cold enough that breath fogs the air, the ground firm beneath frost. A small animal emerges briefly from the earth. The people do not cheer. They watch, quietly, respectfully, knowing that what matters is not the outcome, but the witnessing. Winter does not argue with this. It continues, or it loosens, in its own time. The ritual remains because the feeling remains. The need to pause, the need to ask, the need to hope without certainty. The groundhog stands at that exact point. A shadow is not an omen by itself. It is a relationship between light and form. It exists only when something stands long enough to be seen. In the older understanding, this mattered. The The groundhog does not cast a shadow because winter demands it. He casts a shadow because the light has reached a certain angle, because the sun has climbed just high enough to notice him, because the year has turned far enough to allow recognition. This is why the shadow was never meant to frighten, it was meant to confirm. Winter seeing itself. If the shadow remains long, winter is still settled into the land. Its shape is clear, its hold unbroken. If the shadow shortens or disappears, it is not because winter has fled. It is because the balance between earth and light has begun to change. The groundhog stands between these forces without choosing either. This is the role of a liminal witness, one who does not act, but reveals. People gathered not to be entertained, but to orient themselves. The ritual did not shorten winter. It shortened uncertainty. It gave the waiting a form, a name, a moment that could be shared. Repetition is what gave the ritual strength. Each year the same pause, the same question asked without expectation, the same answer accepted without argument. In this way, Groundhog Day was never about accuracy. It was about continuity. The world does not move forward all at once. It moves by returning to itself, again and again. The groundhog's emergence marks a hinge, a moment when time folds slightly inward, when the future brushes against the present, without committing to it. This is why the ritual survived even as belief softened. People continued to gather, not because they believed completely, but because the act itself had meaning. There is a human moment that repeats quietly in these stories. A farmer standing at the edge of a frozen field, listening, not for certainty, but for permission. A child watching breath rise into the cold air, feeling the difference between endless winter and winter that can be counted. A household measuring supplies, wondering how long the waiting must continue. These moments do not demand answers, they demand acknowledgement. The groundhog provides that. He does not promise an end, he promises awareness. This is why the ritual remains gentle. There is no fear in it, no warning, no threat. The groundhog does not punish if winter stays. He does not reward if it loosens. He simply stands long enough for the world to take note. Older seasonal traditions across Europe carried the same structure. Different animals, different names, the same meaning beneath them. The year pauses, something wakes, people watch, and then they wait a little differently. The groundhog inherited this role as traditions crossed oceans and adapted. The animal changed, the place changed, the language shifted, but the structure held. Winter does not end because people want it to. It ends because the earth has finished doing what it needed to do. The ritual does not hurry that process. It allows people to endure it. Now, as your thoughts slow further, imagine the quiet of that moment. A small animal at the edge of its burrow, cold light touching fur, the ground still hard, the air still sharp. Nothing dramatic happens, and yet everything feels slightly less endless. That is enough. The groundhog story endures because it asks very little of belief. It does not demand faith. It does not require certainty. It asks only for attention. As centuries passed, the ritual traveled. It crossed oceans. It adapted to new land, new animals, new names. But it kept its shape. A single morning, a brief emergence, a pause shared by many. And then, waiting continued. What survived was not the prediction. It was the permission. People learned to live with winter not by denying it, but by measuring it, not by conquering it, but by acknowledging its limits. The groundhog allowed winter to be seen, and what can be seen can be endured. This is why the ritual remains gentle even when belief fades. People still gather, still watch, still repeat the act. Not because they expect an answer, but because repeating the question itself has meaning. In older communities, hope was not loud. It did not arrive with celebration. It arrived quietly, in small allowances. A field walked again, a tool repaired instead of stored, a plan spoken aloud without insisting it would succeed. These were not declarations. They were permissions. The groundhog stands at the center of this practice. He does not command spring to arrive. He does not argue with winter's hold. He simply appears, briefly, and in doing so, reminds the world that waiting is not endless. even when it feels that way. There is a human stillness to this moment. A person steps outside into cold air, stands without speaking, feels the weight of the season, and then returns indoors, carrying something subtle but real. The sense that time has shifted, that the waiting has a shape now. This is the work of ritual, not to change the world, but to change how we remain inside it. The groundhog returns to his burrow, the earth closes around him. Winter continues, or it loosens. Either way, the ritual has already completed its task. Hope has been acknowledged without being promised. Now, as the story settles, allow the image to soften. The field remains quiet. The ground stays cold. The animal disappears back into the earth. Nothing dramatic follows. And yet, something feels lighter. That feeling is enough. The year will turn when it is ready. The light will lengthen without announcement. Snow will recede without apology. Spring does not need to be summoned. It arrives on its own terms. The groundhog does not wait for it. Neither do you. This has been Fairy Tales After Dark.